Imagine spending years creating what is supposed to become the biggest music biopic ever made, only to discover, just months before release, that a crucial part of the story can no longer be shown. Millions of dollars have already been invested, production has wrapped, the cast has finished filming, the marketing campaign is ready. And then, everything changes. A single legal issue forces the filmmakers back to square one. Entire scenes are removed. A major section of the movie disappears. The ending has to be rebuilt from scratch. For most studios, a setback like that would be disastrous. Many projects never recover. Some are delayed for years. Others are quietly canceled altogether. Yet this production somehow survived. Not only did it survive, it went on to become one of the biggest theatrical success stories Hollywood had seen in years. And in the process, it forced movie studios to rethink what audiences actually want. This wasn't simply another film about a famous musician. It became a case study that challenged decades of conventional wisdom about filmmaking, marketing, and box office success. To understand why, we have to go back several years, long before cameras started rolling, long before audiences filled theaters, long before anyone knew whether this ambitious project would succeed or fail. Development on the Michael Jackson biopic began years earlier with enormous expectations. The producers weren't trying to make just another musical film. Their goal was far more ambitious. They wanted to create the definitive cinematic portrait of one of the most recognizable entertainers in history. The project brought together experienced filmmakers who understood the challenge they faced. They weren't telling the story of an ordinary celebrity. They were attempting to capture the life of a performer whose influence stretched across generations and continents. The expectations were enormous. One of the driving forces behind the project had already experienced remarkable success with another music biopic. That earlier film had proven that audiences around the world would enthusiastically support stories about legendary musicians when the production was handled correctly. With Michael Jackson, however, the challenge was even greater. His career was larger. His global recognition was unmatched. His personal life remained one of the most discussed in entertainment history. Creating a balanced film would never be easy. Early versions of the screenplay reportedly aimed to explore both the extraordinary achievements and the difficult controversies that surrounded Michael's life. The intention was to present a broad portrait of the artist, his childhood, his rise with the Jackson 5, his groundbreaking solo career, his creative genius, and the complex chapters that followed. For years, development continued. Sets were built, actors were cast, production moved forward. Then, during the later stages of filmmaking, an unexpected legal complication emerged. According to reports, previously overlooked contractual issues involving material connected to past allegations meant portions of the planned story could no longer be used in the film. The impact was enormous. Scenes already completed suddenly became unusable. Major story elements had to be removed. Instead of making minor adjustments, filmmakers reportedly restructured the final portion of the movie almost entirely. Additional filming followed. New scenes were created. The ending changed dramatically. Rather than continuing through every chapter of Michael Jackson's later life, the revised version concluded during one of the highest points of his performing career. It presented a different emotional ending, one centered on celebration rather than later controversy. That decision would soon become one of the most discussed aspects of the entire production. Some believed it weakened the film. Others argued it created a more uplifting cinematic experience. At the time, nobody knew which opinion audiences would ultimately support. What everyone did know was that the budget continued growing. Large productions are expensive under normal circumstances. Returning for additional filming only increased those costs. Industry observers began wondering whether the project could ever earn enough money to justify the investment. The pressure continued building. Then another major question emerged. Could anyone truly portray Michael Jackson convincingly? Finding the right actor had always been one of the greatest challenges facing the filmmakers. Michael's movements, his voice, his stage presence, his unmistakable style, they were unlike anyone else's. Simple imitation would never be enough. The audience would immediately recognize the difference. The production needed someone capable of capturing far more than appearance alone. Eventually, the filmmakers chose Jafar Jackson, Michael's own nephew. It was a decision that immediately attracted worldwide attention. For Jafar, the role represented an extraordinary responsibility. He wasn't simply playing a legendary entertainer, he was portraying a member of his own family. And before audiences had seen a single completed scene, people everywhere began asking the same question. Could he actually do it? No one knew the answer, but within months, another event would completely transform public expectations, not inside a movie theater, not during a press conference, but online. Because the very first trailer would generate a level of excitement that few people in Hollywood had anticipated. And from that moment forward, everything began to change. For months, uncertainty surrounded the project. The production had survived expensive rewrites. The release date had shifted. Questions continued to dominate entertainment headlines. Could the movie recover? Would audiences embrace another music biopic? And perhaps the biggest question of all, could anyone truly believe Jafar Jackson is Michael Jackson? Then everything changed in a single day. When the first official trailer was released, the internet responded with astonishing speed. Within hours, clips from the preview spread across social media platforms around the world. Fans replayed the dance sequences, they analyzed every costume, they compared each movement to Michael's original performances. Instead of focusing on controversy, people focused on authenticity. What surprised many viewers wasn't simply the visual resemblance, it was the movement, the posture, the timing, the confidence on stage. Rather than feeling like someone trying to imitate Michael Jackson, many viewers felt they were watching someone who understood the rhythm and physical language that made him unique. That reaction became the trailer's greatest strength. Jafar Jackson carried enormous pressure into his first acting role. Unlike experienced Hollywood actors, he couldn't rely on years of film performances. Everything depended on this single opportunity. Fortunately for the filmmakers, audiences quickly noticed something important. Jafar wasn't attempting a simple impersonation. He appeared committed to recreating the emotional energy that audiences associated with Michael himself. That distinction mattered, because millions of fans knew every performance, every signature move, every iconic pose. Anything less than convincing would have been immediately obvious. Instead, excitement grew with every passing hour. The trailer rapidly accumulated millions of views, then tens of millions. Within a single day, it had become one of the most watched trailers ever released for a music-based film, surpassing previous benchmarks set by other major musical productions. Hollywood noticed, studio executives noticed, and perhaps most importantly, fans noticed. Across social media, anticipation transformed into celebration. People discussed which songs they hoped would appear in the finished movie. Others debated which era of Michael's career would be the emotional centerpiece. Some even began planning opening night events months before tickets became available. Videos appeared online showing fans preparing jackets inspired by the Thriller era. Others searched for sequined gloves, black loafers, or military-style stage costumes. For many, attending the premiere wasn't simply going to the movies. It felt like participating in a worldwide celebration. That reaction revealed something larger than simple excitement. It demonstrated that Michael Jackson's cultural influence had never truly disappeared. Years after his passing, audiences across multiple generations still felt personally connected to his music. Older fans remembered experiencing his career in real time. Younger audiences had discovered him through streaming platforms, documentaries, and performances shared online. The film became a meeting point between those generations. Hollywood had expected interest. It had not expected this level of emotional investment. As anticipation continued growing, industry analysts began revising their early box office predictions. Initial forecasts suggested a respectable opening, strong enough to justify the production, perhaps even enough to launch a successful theatrical run. But the trailer changed expectations. The extraordinary online response suggested something much larger might be unfolding. Marketing campaigns accelerated. International promotion expanded. Additional IMAX screenings were secured. Studios recognized that this wasn't behaving like a traditional biography. It was beginning to resemble a worldwide event. The timing also worked in the film's favor. Music biopics had experienced renewed popularity in recent years. Successful releases had demonstrated that audiences still enjoyed seeing legendary performers brought to life on the big screen. But Michael Jackson represented a different category entirely. His influence reached virtually every continent. His concerts filled stadiums around the world. His albums crossed cultural and language barriers unlike almost any artist before or since. That meant the audience wasn't limited to one country or even one generation. It was global. The trailer made that unmistakably clear. Fans from Europe, Asia, South America, Africa, and North America were all reacting simultaneously. Different languages, different cultures, the same excitement. For studio executives, those numbers represented more than popularity. They suggested an opportunity. If the enthusiasm translated into ticket sales, the film might redefine what a music biopic could accomplish commercially. Still, online excitement doesn't always become box office success. Hollywood had seen highly viewed trailers disappoint before. The real test would come on opening weekend. Would millions of online viewers actually buy tickets? Would curiosity become commitment? Nobody knew. But inside Lionsgate, confidence continued growing. The studio believed audiences weren't simply interested in another biography. They wanted an experience, a chance to celebrate the music together inside a theater. And when opening day finally arrived, the results would exceed even the most optimistic expectations. For months, Hollywood analysts believed they understood exactly how this movie would perform. The early projections were optimistic, but cautious. Most industry experts predicted a solid debut, strong enough to justify the enormous production budget, strong enough to prove that audiences still cared about theatrical music biopics. Yet nobody expected what happened next. When opening weekend finally arrived, ticket sales immediately began exceeding expectations. The first day alone signaled that the tracking numbers had underestimated demand. Theaters reported packed screenings, additional showtimes were added, premium format auditoriums filled rapidly. By the end of Friday night, one thing had become obvious. This wasn't going to be an ordinary opening, it was becoming an event. As the weekend continued, attendance remained remarkably strong. Families came together, longtime Michael Jackson fans returned to theaters. Younger audiences, many of whom had never experienced Michael's career firsthand, arrived out of curiosity and left talking about the performances. By Sunday evening, the numbers spoke for themselves. The film delivered one of the biggest opening weekends ever achieved by a musical biopic, dramatically outperforming many early projections and setting a new benchmark for the genre. The success wasn't limited to North America. Across Europe, South America, Asia, and dozens of additional international markets, the same pattern repeated. Audiences showed up in extraordinary numbers. What surprised studio executives wasn't simply the size of the audience, it was the consistency. Instead of relying on one or two major countries, ticket sales arrived from around the globe. Market after market reported impressive openings. That worldwide response confirmed something the trailer had only hinted at. Michael Jackson's appeal had never been limited by geography. His music remained part of popular culture across multiple generations and continents. For Hollywood, that realization carried enormous significance. Studios had traditionally viewed music biopics as primarily domestic releases with international potential. This film challenged that assumption. Instead of growing from one country outward, it exploded almost everywhere at once. Executives quickly recognized that they were witnessing something different. The film wasn't behaving like a niche biography, it was performing more like a blockbuster franchise. Yet unlike superhero films or established cinematic universes, this success depended almost entirely on one thing: the emotional connection audiences already had with the artist. That distinction mattered, because it suggested that certain cultural figures possess a level of worldwide recognition capable of supporting theatrical events on an enormous scale. As the weekend ended, industry headlines focused on one question: how had so many predictions been so far off? The answer wasn't simple. Part of it came from nostalgia, part came from curiosity, part came from the remarkable marketing campaign. But another factor became increasingly obvious. People weren't simply buying tickets to watch a movie. They were gathering to experience Michael Jackson's music together. That communal experience turned out to be one of the film's greatest strengths. Inside theaters, familiar songs triggered immediate emotional reactions. Audiences applauded during performances. Some quietly sang along. Others became visibly emotional during iconic musical moments. For many viewers, it wasn't just entertainment, it felt like revisiting an important part of their own lives. That atmosphere proved difficult to recreate through streaming services or home viewing. The theatrical environment transformed individual memories into a shared experience, and audiences responded accordingly. Studio executives paid close attention, because success on this scale always creates new questions. If one music biopic could perform like this, could others do the same? Or was Michael Jackson simply a unique case? Those discussions began almost immediately. Meanwhile, another debate was quietly developing. While audiences filled theaters, professional critics were publishing reviews, and surprisingly, the two groups seemed to be watching completely different films. Critics raised concerns about the screenplay. Some questioned the film's balance. Others argued that important chapters of Michael Jackson's life deserved greater attention. Yet ordinary moviegoers appeared largely unaffected. Audience reactions remained overwhelmingly enthusiastic. The contrast between professional reviews and public response quickly became one of the most fascinating aspects of the entire release. For decades, critics had played a major role in shaping public expectations. But now something seemed different. The people buying tickets weren't waiting for critics to tell them what to think. They had already made their decision, and that realization would become one of the biggest lessons Hollywood would take away from the film's extraordinary success. As the opening weekend came to an end, Hollywood found itself facing an unexpected contradiction. Theaters were full, ticket sales remained strong, audience enthusiasm continued growing, yet professional reviews painted a far more complicated picture. Some critics praised the film's performances, others applauded the music and production design, but many questioned the screenplay. They argued that important parts of Michael Jackson's life had been simplified. Some believed the film ended too early. Others felt it avoided difficult chapters that had shaped public perception for decades. A number of reviewers also pointed to the last-minute script revisions. According to reports, major sections of the original story had been rewritten after legal concerns forced the production to remove material connected to later events in Michael's life. From a traditional critical perspective, those changes created noticeable gaps. Reviewers asked whether audiences were receiving the complete story. Some argued that the film functioned more as a celebration than a full biography, under normal circumstances. Mixed reviews like these might have slowed ticket sales. Negative headlines often influence casual moviegoers. Studios routinely monitor review scores because they can affect opening weekend momentum. But this time, something unusual happened. The audience simply kept showing up. Day after day, week after week. Theaters remained busy, social media filled with positive reactions from ordinary viewers rather than professional critics. Instead of discussing review scores, people talked about emotional moments, favorite musical performances, powerful dance sequences, and Jafar Jackson's transformation into his famous uncle. Many moviegoers left theaters saying they had experienced something far more emotional than they expected. Some described reliving memories from childhood. Others said hearing Michael Jackson's music on a giant cinema sound system reminded them why his performances had become legendary. For younger viewers, the movie became an introduction to an artist they had previously known only through streaming playlists and internet clips. The difference between critics and audiences became impossible to ignore. Professional reviewers focused on structure, historical balance, narrative choices. Audiences focused on something else entirely: emotion, connection, entertainment, the experience of sharing iconic music with hundreds of other people inside a theater. Hollywood executives watched this divide very carefully, because it suggested that audience behavior might be changing. For decades, studios had relied heavily on critical reception to predict long-term success. Strong reviews usually helped films build momentum. Weak reviews often created problems, but this production challenged that formula. People were no longer waiting for someone else to decide whether they should enjoy a movie. Instead, they trusted their own curiosity. If they wanted to see Michael Jackson's story, they bought a ticket. If they enjoyed the experience, they recommended it directly to friends and family. Word of mouth spread faster than traditional reviews. Online conversations became more influential than newspaper columns. Short videos posted after screenings reached millions of viewers. Audience reactions themselves became part of the marketing campaign. That shift reflected a much broader change happening throughout the entertainment industry. Social media had transformed the relationship between filmmakers and audiences. Years earlier, critics had served as the primary gatekeepers. Now, every viewer could instantly share an opinion with thousands of people, sometimes millions. As positive audience reactions continued spreading online, attendance remained remarkably steady. Repeat viewings became common. Families returned with relatives who had not yet seen the film. Music fans encouraged younger generations to experience Michael Jackson's performances on the largest screen possible. The film evolved beyond a simple theatrical release. It became a shared cultural event, and with every successful weekend, Hollywood became more interested in understanding why. The answer wasn't found only in nostalgia, nor was it explained entirely by celebrity. Instead, the production had tapped into something much deeper. Michael Jackson's music carried emotional meaning for people across multiple generations. His performances represented memories, family gatherings, concert experiences, childhood moments, historic television broadcasts. For many viewers, watching the film wasn't simply observing someone else's life. It meant revisiting pieces of their own. That emotional connection proved stronger than many industry analysts had predicted. It also revealed something important about biography itself. Audiences don't always expect perfection. They don't always demand every historical detail. Sometimes they simply want an honest emotional experience, a story that reminds them why a particular person mattered. The Michael biopic succeeded because it understood that difference. Rather than attempting to satisfy every debate surrounding Michael Jackson's life, it focused primarily on the extraordinary talent that made him one of history's greatest entertainers. Whether everyone agreed with that creative choice became almost secondary, because audiences had already delivered their verdict, and that verdict echoed through box offices around the world. But perhaps the biggest surprise was still ahead. As studio executives studied the numbers, they began asking a completely different question. If one music biopic could generate this kind of global excitement, which legendary artist might become the next cinematic phenomenon? That question would soon reshape development meetings across Hollywood. As the Michael biopic continued attracting audiences around the world, something remarkable was happening behind closed doors in Hollywood. Studio executives weren't just celebrating one successful release, they were studying it. Every ticket sold, every audience survey, every international market, every social media trend. They wanted to understand exactly why this film connected so deeply with viewers. Because if they could identify the formula, perhaps it could be repeated. For years, the entertainment industry had viewed music biopics as an unpredictable genre. Some became enormous successes, others struggled despite telling equally compelling stories. There never seemed to be a guaranteed recipe. But the response to the Michael Jackson film suggested that audiences were looking for something different than many executives had assumed. They weren't simply interested in facts, they wanted emotion, they wanted spectacle, they wanted to experience legendary performances on the biggest screen possible. And above all, they wanted authenticity. That last word became especially important. One reason audiences embraced the film was the extraordinary effort devoted to recreating Michael Jackson's performances. The choreography, the costumes, the lighting, the concert staging, the smallest physical details. Every element worked together to create an experience that felt respectful to the artist's legacy. Rather than relying heavily on digital effects or exaggerated dramatization, the filmmakers focused on recreating moments that audiences already loved. That approach proved surprisingly effective. Moviegoers didn't leave theaters talking only about dramatic scenes. They talked about performances, about hearing iconic songs through powerful theater sound systems, about seeing legendary dance routines recreated on an enormous screen. For many people, the film felt less like watching history and more like attending a concert they never had the chance to experience. That realization immediately attracted Hollywood's attention. Studios began asking whether other legendary musicians could inspire the same response. Development meetings reportedly expanded discussions around additional biographical films. Executives revisited projects that had previously remained on the shelf. Agents began receiving more inquiries. Music catalogs suddenly became far more valuable. Artists whose stories had once seemed too specialized were now viewed through a different lens. If audiences responded emotionally enough, the potential audience could become enormous. The Michael biopic had demonstrated that nostalgia alone wasn't driving success. The production succeeded because it combined familiar music with cinematic storytelling. It reminded viewers why these artists mattered in the first place. And perhaps most importantly, it created shared experiences. Unlike streaming platforms, movie theaters bring strangers together. Hundreds of people laugh together, react together, applaud together, feel emotion together. That communal experience became one of the film's greatest strengths. It also reminded Hollywood of something that had been easy to forget during the streaming era. Some stories simply work better on the largest screen possible. Concert performances, massive musical numbers, crowd reactions, powerful soundtracks, these elements create an impact that home viewing cannot fully reproduce. The Michael biopic embraced that reality, rather than feeling like an extended television program. It felt cinematic. Every performance was designed to fill the screen. Every dance sequence emphasized movement and scale. Every iconic song carried the energy of a live event. Audiences noticed, they responded accordingly. Another important lesson emerged from the marketing campaign. Instead of revealing every major moment beforehand, the promotional material focused on creating anticipation. Trailers highlighted recognizable performances without explaining the entire story. Fans speculated, shared theories, compared scenes to real-life events. That conversation kept the movie in public discussion for months. By the time tickets became available, many people already felt personally invested. Hollywood quickly recognized the value of that strategy. Marketing was no longer simply about advertising. It had become about participation. Audiences wanted to feel involved before the movie even opened. Social media amplified that effect. Reaction videos accumulated millions of views. Dance recreations appeared across multiple platforms. Music clips circulated daily. Every online discussion effectively became free publicity. The audience itself helped expand the campaign. That level of engagement is difficult to manufacture. It happens only when people genuinely care about the subject. Michael Jackson's extraordinary cultural influence made that possible. Still, industry leaders understood an important limitation. Not every musician could generate the same worldwide excitement. Very few artists possessed Michael's unique combination of global recognition, iconic performances, and cross-generational appeal. The lesson wasn't that every biography would become a blockbuster. The lesson was that exceptional stories deserved exceptional treatment. If filmmakers respected both the artist and the audience, remarkable results could follow. Yet amid all the celebration, one challenge continued following the production. Even after its commercial success, many people still debated the film's decision to avoid certain controversial chapters of Michael Jackson's later life. Some believed the creative team had made the correct choice. Others argued that a complete biography required confronting every major event. That discussion never completely disappeared. In fact, it became one of the defining conversations surrounding the film itself. And it raised an even larger question. Can any movie truly tell the complete story of someone as complex as Michael Jackson? Or is every biography no matter how carefully produced, ultimately just one interpretation of a much larger life, that question would become impossible to ignore.